Good morning. How are you guys?
Awesome.
Good morning.
I
Glad
don't
to
know
be
why I
here.
chose to yell.
Yeah, so the whole world is shutting down because Facebook is not letting us live stream, and we're going to have to record and post later. Apparently,
Yeah. What are we gonna do?
it is what it is.
That's
So,
right.
well, nothing keeps us from our Monday morning industry update. Jim Duquette, how are you?
Doing great. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. Well, let's jump into the numbers because Rockwall County got a breath of fresh air this morning. I'll let Michelle pop our numbers up here. All right. So you can see that little blue line finally turned for the better. We took 69, or not we took, but we have 69 active listings in Rockwall County, which is I'll call it a breath of fresh air. What do you call it?
I call it
Good
great
news. That's what I call it. Good news. Good news.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What else do you see here?
Well, even the coming soons, there's more activity there. So that's a predictor as well. So that's another number that pops out at me. Solds are about the same. So that that helps inventory as well. So
Absolutely. Jim, anything you'd add?
No, I was going to say the same thing. Our pendings are remaining the same. Our listings are going up, which really helped our buyers going into the spring market.
Yeah, and I always repeat, it's like you think of it, the analogy of how many signs are going into the yard and how many signs are coming out of the yard. And as long as this time of year we're putting more signs into the yard than we're taking out, inventory's building, right? And we need it to build, and that's going to be a good thing. Let's jump over to Collin County, Michelle. So not the same breath of fresh air, but remember they had an uptick last week and then held constant this week. So it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just the inventory levels are not drastically climbing in Collin County this week. Dallas County, same kind of story. We had a little 2 weeks ago, and right now it's we haven't seen a big spring market takeoff yet, and maybe we're not gonna. What do y'all think?
yeah, I think it's too soon to tell. The coming soons are definitely down. They had an uptick, a huge uptick though, from February 6th to February 13th. 440 to 609 is a huge number. So maybe the spring market just happened a little sooner for them. They were just coming on sooner before spring hit. I don't know, but that's a big number jump.
Yeah, just looking kind of historically, our numbers look actually pretty good with pendings than how we typically do in February, and new listings than how we do this month. We went up in both of those areas compared to January, where we typically remain the same or go down. So in looking at that, I think it's a positive note, but I think there's some other things that we're going to be looking at going through the year that I kind of agree. I don't know that we're going to see a big boom. I think it's going to be kind of this dull, stagnant market.
I think it's going to be a steady eddy. So here's a question. Builders, are they still putting all their inventory in the MLS?
No.
Some are, some aren't. Yeah.
I think it's maybe 50% of what it used to be.
Right.
So there's probably a lot of sales going on that are not reflected in these numbers. Would you agree?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, anytime I say the numbers I'm kind of looking at, I don't put in the new builds into what I'm looking at. It's just the existing market, kind of in what we can anticipate from just our new listings coming in that are our normal residential that we can go after, and the ones going out.
Absolutely. You know, Jim, you sent me an article a week or two ago about how new home permits like tanked in the month of January. You want to comment on that real quick?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good thing to comment on right now. I had an agent a week or two ago send me this YouTube video of a guy in Dallas that said kind of the opposite of that, that the new builders are going to tank the market, the housing market. And he went on to say, you know, they've got 50,000 outstanding permits, and I told my agent, I said, all right, you guys slow down and think about this. The supplies to build all those aren't going to come in all in 1 year. But if you look at just the historic numbers of all the new build permits, they're not even close to where they typically are. And so I think we kind of have to look at that for what it means. Of if you hear new builds are going to tank the market, it's false. They're actually not doing anywhere near what they typically do.
No, it's still like very low inventory compared to what they should be, right?
Right.
And I'm also hearing the cost of building materials, which I'm sure we'll dive into in a little bit, is artificially higher right now than it should be. And most builders know if they wait it out, the cost of that material is actually going to come down 6 to 12 months from now.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see builders kind of playing a push it out game, not that they're not already playing that.
I know I've talked to several builders that they're only allowing so many for 2022. So they're already operating from that stance of waiting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, let's jump into Henderson County, Michelle. What do you see here, Erika?
Well, it's not as great news as Rockwall County. From just talking to agents at Cedar Creek, it's definitely a market that is more of a spring summer market due to the second home lake. So I'm not overly concerned just because of that. And also historically, that's what the numbers show us. It's holding steady. There's not a big jump. There was a decrease, and then it's just kind of holding steady there. I'm not overly concerned yet with inventory, just from boots on the ground and what I'm hearing there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so
A lot
let's
of
go
people
to
are
the.
getting ready to put on the market.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lake market, so
Right.
It's seasonal for sure.
Correct.
All right, so let's go to this topic I think everybody wants to talk about is Ukraine. And I certainly want to discuss kind of the context of what we think this Ukraine crisis is going to do to the real estate industry. But before we go there, I want to talk about a human thing. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of pictures and some negative news, negative imagery that is being flashed in front of all of us. And I think it's prudent to be sensitive to people that are probably dealing with some extra anxiety these days. But I also think it would be an amazing opportunity for all of us to check in with people that are either current or former military inside of our databases, inside of our worlds, and just check in on them, because I did not serve, and I can only imagine, but I'm sure there are people that are having emotional responses to what they're seeing in the news. And I just think it's a human thing to go check in on people right now. Because, I mean, you can't not watch the news and deal with a little anxiety. I don't care who you are right now. So I think that there is a opportunity just to check in on people and be human. Okay, so what do we think Ukraine's going to do to the real estate market? Here's what I know, and then I'm curious y'all's opinions. The stock market is going nuts. The stock market is not 100% directly related to the real estate industry, but it certainly affects the real estate industry with consumer confidence and things along those lines. However, the stock market loosely affects treasury bonds, which directly affects real estate interest rates. So the last couple of weeks, we've been on this call saying, hey, we're expecting interest rates to climb. Interest rates are going to hit 4.5. I actually think this Ukraine crisis is going to keep interest rates at bay for a period of time. What do y'all think?
I mean, I have my opinions, and y'all can agree or disagree with me. I do think it's going to affect, we're already in inflation. There's already inflation happening due to supply chain issues. I don't foresee that getting better, but it could make our market better. And just hear me out on this. So oil, I don't have a crystal ball. Oil will probably hit 125 a barrel. If you look historically, 15, 16 is where it was 125. The real estate market sold the most homes ever in that amount of time. The only thing I'm just don't know what it'll do, and I'm still researching and listening to economists, is how that's going to affect, couple with inflation that's already here. So I do think the cost of living is going to go up. However, when that happens, people will make more money, but they'll spend more money. I do think at some point prices of homes are going to stick just because of affordability. So I know, Brett, you disagree with me on this. However, I just think that is what's going to happen. And that's going to be the cause and effect from oil going up. And we don't need to go into the reasons why oil will be about that. It has heavily to do with what's happening overseas. But I do think, in my opinion, because of that, affordability will come in, which will have some price stickiness, which will cause the market, in my opinion, to be better. So for whatever that's worth. Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we're going to hit, I think it's going to affect the luxury market more than anything. I do agree that with, Gary said it last week, watch oil, watch grain. Those two things, they make up a lot of other products, and that region is where we get a lot of that. So where I think the hard part about this is where inflation is currently, and then you add in just some additional between materials going up more. I still think that the country tries to get inflation back under control. Interest rates still go up. Read a report that said once we get up at 4.25, 4.5, that's going to be where we kind of see the peak of our sales price market. And I think we see our gains come in Q2, and then we see some ups and downs, but we relatively stay even. So I agree with the price stickiness. But I think it just totally correlates with that in that 4.25, 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't see prices declining. I think, Erika, you didn't say it, but I think you actually think prices might decline a little bit.
I think they'll hold. That's what I think. Just because at some point, I think people, according to some financial advisors I've talked to, people, again, you can talk to 6 and get 6 different answers. However, historically, people are going to want to hold on to their cash. And I think at some point in certain price points, they're going to have to hold their value in order to sell, or like hold their price point. It's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think it becomes micro markets. Like I said, with the luxury, I think we see the most movement come in the luxury market. And my wife asked me about a house last night she saw, and she said, when does that neighborhood hit $1 million? And I just kind of shrugged my arms, and I told her, I remember whenever there was a $700,000 house that hit in Buffalo Creek, and that sat on the market while now we got these $1 million homes. And so I think we see these different micro markets within areas where the prices, they hold, they come down, and we still see some go up, but overall, I think we stay average.
Yep.
Because I think the only other option is to change the lending practices, and I definitely don't want that, because that doesn't serve anybody well. So
That's not going to happen. So here's the $1,000,000 question. I pick up a buyer today, first time home buyer. What do you tell me?
Pray. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
It's funny, but not funny.
Well, one, I still think you ask a lot of questions because there could be some uncertainty that they have that they don't even know why they're uncertain. So I think it's still asking a lot of questions of, you know, getting to know them and then that direction on where to go. There's still the normal knowing your market, knowing what's happening. Yes, it is a seller's market, educating them. But I think right now, the people are uncertain. People are fearful. They don't really know what's going to happen. So I do think still coming from care and candor is always going to serve our agents well. And then finding out why they're concerned and then educating them around that. So
got it. Jim, what would you say to me? I'm a first-time home buyer.
How long are you? How long are you going to be staying in the house?
5 years.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You know, but seriously, after hearing Gary last week and watching him, I always look for the 4% trend line. And so whenever he had the graph of the 4% trend line, this was the first year I went, oh my gosh, like it finally caught up. The home prices have finally caught up. And he said it, we've got to see some leveling off here. Otherwise we're going to get into some territory that you're kind of uneasy about. But he went back to when the market, when we hit the Great Recession, and he said, you know, if you stayed in your house for 5 years, you were fine. And so that's kind of the conversation I would have with the first-time home buyer of, I don't necessarily think home values are going to go down, but we don't have crystal balls. So I wouldn't treat this as a situation of, well, I may be moving in a year or two. You know, we may want to just reevaluate what you're really doing.
Mhm.
That's good advice. You know, I went back and looked at that home price graph, and there's not a single period of time where 5 years didn't recover.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show, as long as you can hold out 5 years, no matter what, you can wait something out. You can wait out prosperity in real estate.
Yes.
Mhm.
All right. Jim, you wanted to talk about 2022, 2023 predictions. Why don't you jump into that?
Yeah, so NAR put out their economic outlook for the rest of this year going into 2023. And, you know, I've seen agents say, oh, well, we don't know what's going to happen. And you're absolutely right. We don't know what's going to happen. But we have a lot of really good data around what may happen. And we shouldn't ignore it. And so if you've never looked into Netris trends, you should really look into Netris trends, look at your existing homes. And I'll take a screenshot of this graph I'm looking at. But if you look at the 2015 to 17 market, we kind of had what looked like, I'd say, devil horns, where we had a peak, we went down, stayed stagnant for a few months, and then we had another peak. But there wasn't any tall peak like we've had the last couple of years or the 3 years prior to that. Meaning everything stayed relatively the same. We didn't have much growth. And so when you start looking at the 2022 market, that's what it really looks like. It looks like we're actually having a weird peak in the first quarter. And then we have kind of this downwards market. So we almost have like a reverse peak. Not saying that the rest of the year we're going to go down, but we're going to see a lot of tapering off. I think a lot of that has to do with interest rates. I think a lot of that has to do with inflation, just getting a lot of things back to normal. And, you know, I think consumer confidence is all just surrounded in everything I just said. And then when you take a further look at the existing home prices, they've got it at on average across the nation at 357 at the end of quarter one. And by the time we get to the end or beginning of 2023, we're at 366, and that's after peaking in June at 374, 375. So I think we're going to see some nice movement. We're going to have some, if 2017 is an indicator, and I kind of think it is the way we're kind of shaping out, that was a great year for new listings. But I think the pendings are going to slow down, which is only going to be great. I think it kind of sets up for a nice 2023. And even when you start looking at the 2023 numbers, we start seeing this upward slope again. So it's one of those that this year we really have to buckle down and make calls. You have to force yourself, make calls, do the things that work. KW has a great graphic that I saw in ESO many times, and it was a triangle, and it was basically creativity and or fundamentals and creativity, with creativity up at the top. And when you turn it upside down, everything gets out of balance. So we have to be really fundamental this year.
Yep. Perfect. I was sitting there thinking while you're going through this. So price appreciation over the last 12 months was what?
And like 15, 16% appreciation, 15 to 16%.
Yeah. So you realize if we sold 90% of the houses, it almost picks up the difference, right? Like, we're going to still make the same amount of money, but the units count's going to be a little bit less just because the dollar volume went up. And not that that's a good or a bad thing. It's all in perspective. I just don't see the actual sales going down, only if inventory doesn't show up. I think the demand, there's like this secret demand, this pocket demand of people that would buy a house today if they could. And we're just waiting on property to hit the market so they can buy.
Yeah.
And I don't think they care if the interest rate's 4.5 or not.
I will say there was another graph I sent over, and it kind of broke the U.S. out in different regions. So you had your West, South, Mid, and Northeast. And Northeast and West are about the lowest that they've ever been. And so then when you look at it, the South is basically carrying the market right now. We're right about average. So if you're looking at this U.S. economic outlook, I tend to agree with you, Brett, as far as where we are in our region. Looking at the South, if we're going to see some diminishing returns in the Northeast, in the West, and maybe stay the same, slightly up in the Midwest, that means that the South is going to carry again, which makes those numbers overall kind of stay even up a little bit.
Yeah. So of course, us and our crystal ball, we all know the truth, but the reality is the conversation today looks different than it did 2 weeks ago. And it just goes to show that things happen. This Ukrainian crisis threw the real estate industry for a whirl. And we take it with a grain of salt, because that's what professionals do, is they find a way to win in any market. And I believe that we're training for that. And everything we're talking about today is just getting the dialogue and the skill set so we can go win, right? And I just appreciate y'all's comments. Y'all are smarter than me, so I'm here to learn, and off we go, right?
Absolutely.
Great.
You said something there. We've got to be the professionals. We've got to address the public with facts and let them make decisions. But starting fires where there aren't any fires is not something we need to get into the habit of doing.
That's right.
Not at all.
Facts will take the emotion out of the conversation. So we just have to continue to educate ourselves.
Yeah.
So the best sales.
I'm just going to go ahead.
I was just saying the best salespeople are the best educators. So
I hope somebody takes my challenge and calls your database with care calls or calls all the people that have served in the military in your database and check in on them. It's a perfect touch, and it's also human. So please text me if you accept my challenge and go do it. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Bye. Be safe.
Bye.
Bye.